The garden was a fantasy of pink and blue. Balloons shaped like fluffy clouds floated against the perfect afternoon sky, and a giant banner reading, "He or she, come and see," was strung between two ancient oak trees on my family's estate. 200 guests, a carefully curated list of our closest friends and family, mingled on the perfectly cut lawn. Their laughter was a gentle melody that mixed with the soft, elegant music from the string quartet we had hired. My hand rested on my very round belly, a protective gesture that had become second nature over the past 6 months. From the outside, everything was perfect. A picture book moment of joy. But I knew better. It was all too perfect. Leo, my handsome, charming husband, stepped onto the small, decorated stage we had set up near the giant reveal box. He tapped the microphone, and a gentle feedback sound hushed the happy chatter of the crowd. He flashed his famous smile, the one that could light up a room, the one that had made my heart flutter like a trapped bird when we first met. Today, watching him, it just made my stomach clench into a tight, cold knot. "Hello, everyone," he began, his voice as smooth as polished stone. "Clara and I are so happy you could be here to share this incredible moment with us. This journey to parenthood, it really changes a man." He paused, looking directly at me, his eyes full of what looked like adoration. The crowd sighed. It makes you realize what's truly important in life. It makes you realize you have to be true to yourself, no matter what the cost. The guests murmured in agreement. In the front row, my mother, a sweet woman who believed in fairy tales, dabbed her eyes with a silk tissue. I saw Leo's mother, Mrs. Vance, sitting stiffly beside her, a smug little smile playing on her lips. And next to her was my cousin Cassandra, my supposed best friend, who was pretending to look down at her phone, but I could see the grin she was trying to hide. They all knew what was coming. They were all in on it. "When I married Clara," Leo continued, and his voice took on a serious, almost sad tone, "I thought I knew what forever looked like, but life is full of surprises, isn't it?" He reached slowly into the inside pocket of his expensive suit jacket. My heart didn't race. It became heavy and steady, like a drumbeat before a battle. I knew he wasn't pulling out a heartfelt poem or a special gift for the baby. I knew exactly what was in that crisp, white envelope. "And the biggest surprise," he said, his voice now dripping with fake sadness, "is learning that some things just aren't meant to be." He unfolded the papers, the sound of the crackling sheets echoing in the sudden silence. "Clara, I will always care about you, but I can't live a lie anymore. I'm so sorry to do this here, in front of everyone, but I need to be honest." He held up the papers for everyone to see. "These are divorce papers." A collective gasp sucked the air out of the garden. The music from the string quartet stopped with a clumsy screech. My father shot up from his seat, his face turning a furious, blotchy red. A wave of whispers started, buzzing like angry bees as people's eyes darted between me, standing alone by the cake table, and the man on stage who was trying to publicly shatter my world. Leo's expression was meant to look like he was in pain, but his eyes danced with a cruel triumph. He expected me to burst into tears. He wanted me to run away in shame, to completely fall apart so he could look like the sad, strong man who had to do a hard thing. He thought he had won. He thought he was destroying me. I stood there for a long moment, letting the heavy silence hang in the air. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me, filled with pity and shock, waiting for my reaction. Leo's smirk grew wider. He held the divorce papers out to me, a final, public act of cruelty. Slowly, I began to walk towards the stage. My feet felt steady on the soft grass. My spine was straight. I didn't take the papers from his outstretched hand. Instead, I gently took the microphone from his other hand. His confident smile faltered for just a second, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. I turned to face our guests, my expression calm. "Thank you, Leo, for your honesty," I said. My voice was clear and steady, carrying easily across the silent lawn. It didn't tremble at all. I too have an announcement to make, and frankly, I think it's a little more exciting than that one. Just 1 year ago, that cruel scene in the garden would have seemed like a bad dream, completely impossible. A year ago, I was living in a fairy tale, and Leo was my Prince Charming. We met at a charity gala my father hosted. I was used to men who were either scared of my family's name or only interested in it. They would talk to me while looking over my shoulder, trying to spot my father. But Leo was different. His eyes, a warm, deep brown, never left my face. He asked me about my passion for restoring old books, not about my father's company. He made me laugh. A real, deep belly laugh that made me feel like the shy girl I used to be before the Harrison family fortune became the first thing everyone knew about me. He swept me off my feet. Our first few months together were a blur of perfect moments that felt like they were pulled straight from a movie. There were surprise picnics in the countryside, late-night drives along the coast, listening to old music, and small, thoughtful gifts that showed he was always listening. He remembered that I loved a specific, rare flower from my childhood and had it planted in pots on my balcony. He knew I hated loud, crowded restaurants, so he would cook for me, filling our evenings with the smell of garlic and herbs. He made me feel seen. He made me feel safe. Of course, there were warnings. They were like quiet whispers in a loud room, easy to ignore when you only wanted to hear the music. My father, a man who built an empire by being able to read people better than a balance sheet, was the first to sound a gentle alarm. We were having dinner one night, and Leo was charmingly explaining his job in finance. But soon, the conversation shifted. Leo started asking my father very specific questions about Harrison Industries, about profit margins, and expansion plans. Later that evening, as my father walked me to my car, he put a hand on my arm. "He's very ambitious. That one," he said, his voice soft. "There's nothing wrong with that, Clara. Just be sure it's you he's ambitious for." I brushed it off, telling myself my father was just being overprotective. Then there was his mother, Mrs. Vance. The first time I met her, she barely looked at me. Her eyes scanned the living room of my family's home, taking in the art on the walls and the antique furniture. "Leo has worked so hard to get to this point," she said, looking at a painting, not at me. "He deserves a life of comfort." I thought it was an odd thing to say, but I assumed she was just proud of her son for finding love. I didn't realize she saw me not as a person, but as a destination. And then there was Cassandra, my cousin, my friend since we were children. She loved Leo instantly, a little too instantly. She was always there, joining us for dinner, tagging along on weekend trips. "It's so wonderful that the three of us get along so well," she'd say, linking her arm through mine. But sometimes, I'd see her and Leo share a look or a quiet joke I wasn't a part of. When I'd ask what was funny, they'd just smile and say, "Oh, it's nothing." I was so happy to be in love, so happy that everyone in my life seemed to love him too, that I told myself I was just being silly and insecure. After only 6 months, he proposed in Paris, on a bridge over the Seine at sunset. It was so romantic, so perfect, that I cried and said yes without a second thought. The wedding was a grand affair, and as I walked down the aisle, I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. I was marrying the man who saw me for me, the man who would protect my heart forever. Looking back now, I see it all so clearly. The perfect romance was just the perfect lie. It was a beautiful stage, and I was the only person who didn't know the play was a tragedy. The first few months of our marriage were just like our whirlwind romance, a dream. We moved into a beautiful home that my parents had gifted us, and I spent my days happily decorating, choosing furniture, and making our house a home. Leo would come home from his new high-ranking job at my father's company, always with a smile on his face and a story to tell. He'd wrap his arms around me, kiss my forehead, and tell me how much he loved me. The perfect image was complete. But even the most beautiful mirrors can crack, and the first crack is often so small you almost miss it. It started with a tiny, cold feeling that began to grow in my stomach. A feeling that something was just off. Sometimes Leo would work late, which was normal, but when he came home, he didn't smell like his office. He smelled of a perfume I didn't wear. When I asked about it, he'd laugh it off. "Oh, you know how it is, Clara. Hugging clients, shaking hands. It's a busy world out there." I wanted to believe him, so I did. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday. I was gathering laundry, and as I emptied the pockets of the suit he had worn the day before, my fingers brushed against a crinkled piece of paper. It was a receipt from a very famous, very expensive jewelry store downtown. On it was one item, the Starlight pendant. The price made my eyes widen. It was more than most people make in a year. My heart gave a little flutter of excitement. Was it a surprise for me? Our 6-month anniversary was coming up. I pictured a beautiful diamond necklace and smiled, tucking the receipt away, feeling a little guilty for spoiling my own surprise. But our anniversary came and went. There was a lovely dinner and a beautiful bouquet of flowers, but no necklace. A week later, I decided to ask him about it, trying to sound casual. "Leo, honey," I said one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner, "I found a receipt the other day from that fancy jewelry store. Did you buy something for a client?" He didn't even look up from the plate he was drying. "Oh, that? Yes, a retirement gift for the wife of a very important business partner. Had to make a good impression, you know. It's all part of the game." He said it so smoothly, so easily, but it felt wrong. He had never mentioned a retirement party, and the name of the pendant, the Starlight, felt so personal, so romantic. It didn't sound like a corporate gift. "Oh, of course," I said, forcing a smile. "That makes sense." But it didn't. The crack in the mirror widened. The moment the mirror finally shattered happened a few weeks later. We were curled up on the couch watching a movie. It was a comfortable domestic scene. His phone, which was usually glued to his hand, was lying face up on the coffee table. Midway through the film, the screen lit up. A notification popped up, and even from where I was sitting, I could read the words clearly. It was a message from Cassandra. It said, "Thinking of you tonight." The 2 red hearts seemed to glow in the dark room. They felt like a slap in the face. Before I could even process what I was seeing, Leo snatched the phone, his movements quick and panicked. He quickly typed something and put the phone back down, this time face down. "Work stuff," he muttered, not looking at me. "Always bothering me." But I had seen it. I had seen her name, and I had seen those hearts. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The late nights, the perfume, the shared looks I had ignored, and the necklace. The horrible, sinking realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The Starlight pendant wasn't for a client's wife. It was for her, my cousin, my friend. That night, I called my best friend Nina. I met her at a quiet little cafe, my hands shaking as I held my cup of tea. I told her everything, the words tumbling out of me in a whispered rush. I felt so stupid, so blind. Nina listened patiently, her expression growing harder with every word I spoke. When I was done, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm. "Clara, you are not crazy, and you are not stupid," she said, her voice full of steel. "You were in love, but this is not right. These aren't just little coincidences. Don't confront him again. Don't let him know you know more. You need to be smart about this. You need to find out exactly what you're dealing with." Her words hung in the air, filled with a terrifying logic. She was right. Crying and yelling would get me nowhere. I had to know the whole ugly truth. Leaving the cafe that night, Nina's words echoed in my head. Asterisk, you need to be smart about this. Asterisk. The hurt and betrayal I felt was like a fire, and my first instinct was to run home and scream at Leo, to throw the phone and the receipt and his lies right back in his face. But Nina was right. A big, emotional confrontation would only give him the chance to lie his way out of it again, to twist the story and make me look like the hysterical, jealous wife. He was good at that. No, I had to be cold. I had to be calculated. I had to gather proof that he couldn't deny. The next day, I contacted a private investigator. The man's name was Mr. Jones, and he came highly recommended by my father's head of security. He was a quiet, serious man with tired eyes that looked like they had seen every kind of human ugliness. Sitting in his plain office, I felt a wave of shame. I was hiring a stranger to spy on my own husband. I told myself it was just to put my mind at ease, to prove that the late nights and the heart emojis were all just a big misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew I was looking for the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I gave Mr. Jones all the information I had, Leo's schedule, Cassandra's address, the name of the jewelry store. I told him to be discreet. "I just need to know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He simply nodded. "You will," he promised. The first report arrived a week later in a plain brown envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a collection of photographs. My breath caught in my throat. There they were. Leo and Cassandra. In one photo, they were laughing together at an outdoor cafe, their heads close together. In another, he was helping her put on a coat, his hands lingering on her shoulders for just a little too long. And then there was the final, devastating picture. It was taken at night, and the quality was a little grainy, but it was unmistakably them. Cassandra was standing on her tiptoes, her arms wrapped around his neck, and on her neck, catching the light from a street lamp, was a delicate, sparkling necklace. The starlight pendant. Seeing the proof was so much worse than just suspecting. It was a cold, hard confirmation that my entire marriage was a sham. I cried for hours, mourning the man I thought I had married, and the life I thought we were building. But as the tears dried, something else took their place. A cold, hard anger. This wasn't just a simple affair. This felt like a betrayal on a much deeper level. I called Mr. Jones again. "I need you to keep digging," I said, my voice now firm. "I want to know everything. Look into his finances, his work accounts, everything." The second report came 2 weeks later, and it was the one that changed everything. It wasn't just about an affair anymore. It was about a calculated, cruel plan. Mr. Jones had uncovered a far more sinister plot. Leo had been using his high-level access at my father's company to embezzle money. Millions of dollars. He had been slowly and systematically funneling funds into a secret offshore bank account, an account that was untraceable and set up under a false name. The report laid it all out in black and white. The fake invoices, the ghost employees, the complex web of transfers. He was robbing my family blind. The final piece of the puzzle was a series of emails between him and Cassandra. They weren't love letters. They were business plans. They had planned the whole thing from the beginning. Marry the rich girl, get inside her father's company, steal as much as possible, and then get out. The public divorce was his grand finale, his exit strategy. He was going to humiliate me in front of everyone we knew, painting me as an unstable and emotional wreck. He believed that in the chaos and shame, no one would think to look at the company's finances. He would walk away looking like a victim, and I would be left broken and embarrassed while he and Cassandra started a new life with my family's money. Reading those emails, I felt no more tears. The sadness was gone, burned away by a white-hot rage. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had tried to break my spirit, my family, and my future. He thought I was just a sweet, naive little rich girl who would crumble at the first sign of trouble. He had underestimated me, and that was going to be the biggest mistake of his life. The fire of betrayal had burned away all my tears, leaving behind something harder and colder, like steel. I sat for hours in my study. The private investigator's reports spread across the desk, the photographs of Leo and Cassandra, a painful stain on the polished wood. I was no longer a heartbroken wife. I was a general studying a map of enemy territory. He thought I was fragile. He thought I was a doll to be played with and then discarded. He and Cassandra and his smug mother had all made the same mistake. They saw the soft exterior and assumed there was nothing but fluff underneath. They had no idea they had just awakened something fierce. A few days later, I went to a routine ultrasound appointment. I drove myself, going through the motions like a robot. My mind wasn't on the baby, not really. It was a whirlwind of legal documents, bank transfers, and schemes for revenge. I felt a pang of guilt for being so distracted, but I reminded myself that everything I was planning now was to protect this child, to ensure they would never be touched by the poison that was their father. I lay on the paper-covered table in the cool, dark room. The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, squeezed cold gel onto my stomach. "All right, Clara, let's see how our little one is doing today," she said cheerfully. I stared at the black and white screen, watching the flickering image take shape. For a moment, the anger and the plotting faded away, replaced by the overwhelming love a mother feels. My baby. My innocent, wonderful baby. Dr. Evans was quiet for a long time, moving the ultrasound wand slowly across my belly. A knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. She turned to me, and a huge, brilliant smile spread across her face. "Everything is more than okay, Clara," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Everything looks perfect." "With both of them?" I blinked. The words didn't register at first. "Both of them?" I repeated, confused. She laughed and turned the screen more towards me, pointing. Yes. See? Here's one heartbeat. And right over here is another. Congratulations, Clara. You're having twins. Twins. The word echoed in the small, quiet room. Twins. My mind began to race, not with joy or panic, but with a sudden electric clarity. It was like a forgotten key had just been dropped into my hand. A memory flashed in my mind, so vivid it was like I was there all over again. I was in my father's lawyer's office, sitting next to Leo as we signed our prenuptial agreement. I had been uncomfortable, but Leo had insisted it was just a formality, a smart thing for people of our standing to do. He had been so arrogant, so confident. I remembered him laughing as he pointed to a specific clause. "Let's add this in for fun," he'd said to the lawyers, winking at me. "Just in case Clara gives me a whole litter of kids." I remembered blushing, embarrassed, while the lawyers looked uncomfortable. The clause was strange, almost like a joke. It stated that in the highly unlikely event of a multiple birth twins, triplets, or more the entire financial agreement in case of divorce would be completely restructured. It was designed to secure the children's futures. It stipulated that 80% of all our combined times assets would be immediately placed into a secure trust for the children, a trust managed solely by me, the mother. At the time, he thought it was hilarious. He was so sure of his plan, so sure of his control, that he added it as a little power play, a way to show how generous he could be in a ridiculous, impossible scenario. He had sealed his own fate with a joke. Lying on that table, staring at the two tiny, flickering heartbeats on the screen, the perfect plan formed in my mind. It was intricate, it was brilliant, and it was devastating. The gender reveal party, the stage he had chosen for my ultimate humiliation, would now be my stage. It would be the place where I took back everything he had stolen, and more. The universe hadn't just given me 2 children, it had given me the perfect weapon. As soon as I left the doctor's office, my hands steady on the steering wheel, I made a call. Not to my mother, not to Nina, but to my father. When he answered, there was no panic or sadness in my voice. "Dad," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "Cancel your afternoon meetings. I need you to call the legal team and have them meet us at the house in an hour. Leo's little plan is about to blow up in his face. I have a plan, and it's going to be perfect." The days leading up to the gender reveal party were the longest of my life. I had to live inside the lie, to play the part of the blissfully happy, expectant mother, and it took every ounce of strength I had. I smiled when Leo kissed me in the morning, a kiss that felt as cold as a snake's skin against my cheek. I laughed at his jokes, the sound hollow in my own ears. I was an actress in the final scenes of a very dark play, and I had to deliver the performance of a lifetime. My father and his legal team had been magnificent. We met in secret, poring over documents in his soundproof study. When I first laid out my plan, my father's face was a mixture of fury at Leo's betrayal and immense pride. He looked at me not as his little girl, but as an equal, a strategist. The lawyers were initially shocked, then impressed. They worked quickly and quietly, gathering the necessary paperwork, preparing the legal traps that would snap shut the moment I gave the signal. Every piece was being moved into place. I watched Leo, Cassandra, and Mrs. Vance like a hawk. Now that I knew the truth, their secret communications were laughably obvious. A shared smirk across the dinner table, a quick, triumphant glance between Leo and his mother when they thought I wasn't looking. Cassandra would text me constantly, asking about the party details, her messages filled with sickeningly sweet emojis. "Oh, sweetie, I'm so excited for you. This is going to be the best day ever," she wrote. I would reply with equal sweetness. "I know. I can't wait for you to be here." Each word I typed was a drop of poison I was saving just for them. They thought they were so clever. They moved around my house, the home my family had given us, finalizing their little scheme. They believed I was oblivious, lost in a happy fog of pregnancy hormones and nursery decorations. They had no idea that I was the one pulling the strings. My father's head of security, a man named Mr. Evans, who had known me since I was a child, had replaced the party's catering staff and waiters with his own discreet, highly trained security personnel. They moved silently among the party planners, their eyes missing nothing, their purpose known only to me, my father, and a select few. They weren't just there to serve drinks, they were there to block the exits. The day of the party arrived, a picture-perfect Saturday. The sun was shining, and the garden looked like a dream. As I got ready, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I was wearing a simple, elegant white dress that showed off my baby bump. I looked serene, glowing, every bit the happy mother-to-be. But my eyes told a different story. They were calm, but there was a storm gathering behind them. Greeting the guests was the hardest part. I had to accept their hugs, listen to their congratulations, and smile at their excitement, all while knowing that in a few short hours, this happy celebration would turn into a spectacle of a very different kind. I saw Nina arrive, and she gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. She knew something was going to happen, though I hadn't told her the full details. Her presence was a silent source of strength. Then I saw them. Leo stood by the drink table, holding a glass of champagne, looking every bit the proud, handsome husband. His mother was fawning over him, and Cassandra stood nearby, chatting with some of our friends, occasionally glancing over at Leo with a possessive glint in her eye. They were a little triangle of conspiracy, radiating smug confidence. They thought this was their moment of triumph, the culmination of their perfect, cruel plan. I took a deep breath, my hand resting on my belly, feeling the gentle flutter of my 2 babies inside me. They were my secret weapon, my miracle. This wasn't just for me, it was for them. To protect them, to give them a future free from the greed and deception of their father. Finally, the moment came. The string quartet finished a song, and the head caterer, who was actually Mr. Evans, gave me a subtle nod. The stage was set. All the players were in position. I watched as Leo handed his champagne glass to Cassandra, gave her a tiny, conspiratorial wink, and walked toward the stage. He picked up the microphone, tapping it to get everyone's attention. He flashed that brilliant, fake smile, and a hush fell over the crowd. He was ready to deliver his show-stopping, heartbreaking speech. He had no idea I was about to give a much better one. The only sound in the garden was the gentle rustle of leaves in the oak trees. 200 people stood frozen, their eyes locked on me. Leo's face was a mask of confusion, the triumphant smirk replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He thought this was just a desperate, embarrassing attempt to save face. He had no idea what was coming. I smiled, a small, genuine smile. "First," I said into the microphone, my voice echoing across the silent lawn, "regarding these papers." I gestured to the divorce documents he had tried to hand me, which now sat on a small table beside the stage. "I accept." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Leo's confusion deepened. This wasn't part of his plan. He expected tears and denial, not calm acceptance. "And second," I continued, turning my head slightly to look directly at my cousin in the front row, "I think it's time everyone knew the real reason for this divorce. Isn't that right, Cassandra?" Cassandra's face went white. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, her eyes wide with panic. All heads in the front row swiveled to stare at her. I saw the flash of understanding and horror on my aunt's face. "I'm sure you'll both be very happy together," I said sweetly, before turning my attention back to the wider audience. "But now for the real main event, the reason we're all here." I placed my free hand on my belly. The gender reveal. For a moment, the tension broke. A few people clapped nervously, eager to move past the horrifying awkwardness. I gave a signal to my father's security man, Mr. Evans, who was still disguised as the head caterer. He nodded and walked over to the giant reveal box. "Are we having a boy, or are we having a girl?" I asked, my voice now light and cheerful. The crowd shouted back their guesses. Leo stood on the stage beside me, looking lost. His grand moment of destruction had been hijacked, and he didn't know what to do. Mr. Evans opened the latches on the box. A cascade of balloons flew out, soaring into the blue sky. Half were blue and half were pink. The crowd erupted in confused cheers. "It's a boy," I announced happily, pausing for effect. "And a girl." The garden exploded with applause. People were hugging and cheering, caught up in the joy and surprise of twins. But I wasn't finished. I raised my hand for silence, and the crowd quieted down, sensing there was more to come. I turned to Leo. The blood was starting to drain from his face. He was smart enough to know this wasn't just a happy surprise. "You see, Leo," I said, my voice dropping, becoming cold and clear. "You seem to have forgotten the details of the prenup you were so insistent we sign. You probably thought it was funny when you added that little clause, the one about what would happen in the highly unlikely event of a multiple birth." His eyes went wide with dawning horror. He remembered. "Let me remind you," I said, savoring the moment. "It says that in the case of twins, to secure their future, 80% of our combined times assets are to be placed in a trust. A trust that is managed solely by me." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And when I say combined assets, Leo, I mean all of them. The ones people know about, and the secret ones too." His face was now the color of ash. A single bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "That trust will be quite full," I went on, delivering the final blow, "especially after we recover the $7 million you so cleverly embezzled from my father's company." A collective, horrified gasp swept through the guests. Leo's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His perfect plan, his entire world, was crumbling to dust around him. "You thought you were destroying me," I said, my voice low and powerful. "But you just secured my children's future, and you paid for it with your own greed." On my signal, the men I had identified as waiters moved. They weren't serving anymore. They moved with calm efficiency, securing the garden exits. Mr. Evans stepped forward, his friendly caterer disguise gone, replaced by the grim expression of a security professional. What is this?" Leo stammered, finally finding his voice. "This," I said, setting the microphone down, "is the end of the show." I looked him directly in the eye. "My father's security team has secured the premises, Leo, and the police are waiting for you at the front gate." As if on cue, his mother, Mrs. Vance, let out a shrill shriek and fainted dramatically in her chair. Cassandra was sobbing, trying to hide her face in her hands. And Leo, he just stood there, utterly defeated, as two of the security men walked onto the stage and gently took him by the arms. They led him away, a broken man stripped of his pride and his stolen fortune. As he passed me, I didn't feel hatred or even satisfaction. I just felt free. I stood tall, my hands resting on my belly, feeling the two tiny lives within. The party was over, but my life, our life, was just beginning.